Erick Ponce, thank you so much for joining me today, the CEO and founder of ICAN Latin America. You have such a great background behind you. I love the symbols and it looks really cozy. But besides that, wanted to kind of pass the ball to you. Please, we're not here to hear about me. We're here to hear about what you and you're working on. So please tell me kind of your background, where you're from, where you're at right now, and everything else.
Yeah, thanks, Rant. And again, super excited to be invited for this conversation. Yeah, a little bit about me. So born and raised in Mexico, though most of my teenage years I spent traveling. I lived in the States as well, in Michigan, a little bit in Chicago. Then when I was around 18 years old, I created my first company. So I've always been in the entrepreneur mindset. I created my first company, which was a translation company. Back in the day, we didn't have the AI and the whole process. So we needed like specialized translations. So as you can tell, my background is obviously Mexico and Latin America. I have not native Spanish, but my English is not half bad. So we started with that, and that was my first company. We did a seed round, and for whatever reason, I ended up living in Chile, in the country Chile in South America, just to kickstart that effort. So that's a little bit of my background. I've been traveling a little bit around here. However, for the last 20 years now, I've been very focused on the healthcare, startup, health tech, healthcare industry, so to speak. I just started looking into that. My background is my college education is actually way far off from what I'm doing right now, which is healthcare. My major is in philosophy, actually, but I never practice, or as a philosopher would say, I practice every day. Yeah, so anyway, I started with my company. I sold my company, so that gave me a little bit of a wrong way to start looking into the startup and investor mindset. I became an angel investor. Like I said, I was gravitated towards healthcare. So my first investments were in some healthcare companies here in Mexico. Then I started looking into something, a little bit bigger on a regional mindset. So I always look down to Latin America. I do believe that there's a lot of, diamond in the rough kind of situation, what we have in Mexico and South. So I started looking into that, and for whatever happened, for whatever reasons, that we can probably go a little bit more in depth, I ended up in the cannabis industry. I started my company about 8 years ago now, and now ICAN, which is based in the States, but mainly operations in Mexico. We are the first company to have legal cannabis medications in the country. So it's been quite a journey. ICAN started as an educational company first, because we realized that when we talk about cannabis, there's basically two sides. Either it's the devil and it's all the taboo and all the all the baggage, cultural baggage we have.
What do they call it? Yeah, the devil's lettuce.
Yeah, I mean, and it's hard to go against again that cultural background on the plants. So. But again, like I said, my perspective was on healthcare, so I started seeing the real interactions with patients and the real medicine behind it, the real science behind it. So I was all into the project, and this is where we are. This is where we are right now. Like I said, we started as an educational company. We morphed into now a pharmaceutical company that produces medications. We're focused on Mexico right now, looking into South America, but always looking also up to what Canada and the States are doing, because you guys are leading the way in that industry as well.
I like it, man. Dude, great. Very concise, very straightforward, really good summary. I want to hear more. So it's kind of an interesting topic, talking about like the medical industry in Mexico, and especially for most Americans who are going to be watching this. If you're from Texas, it's very common for a lot of Texans to kind of go down to Mexico and get either like dental work or different procedures done. And recently I've been hearing there's a major boom in different things like stem cell therapy, or people are kind of getting like their knees and elbows and different joints kind of like injected, and infusions and intravenous, injections as well of stem cells. So very interesting things that are happening down there, and people are willing to go across border lines to to get them.
I mean, without being too political, it is quite a difference between the healthcare system in the States and the rest of the world, really. But Mexico is a prime example of not going over. Of making a completely business out of it. So yeah, I mean, it's an industry, and there's a lot of high quality healthcare providers, but the costs are so there's such a trench. There's such a difference between what is the cost in the States that sometimes here in Mexico you can even pay out of pocket, and it's not gonna even cost you a fraction of what you can pay even with insurance in the States. So yeah, it is a thing. The medical tourism, we call it, it's booming for sure, and it's always been, like you said, people from the States coming to Mexico for dental work or for minor surgeries. For sure, it's a thing.
Interesting. Yeah, dental. You called it medical tourism.
Medical tourism, for sure.
I'm gonna remember that one. Before we kind of go into like the history of the company, I want to hear, you said you're doing, it's pharmaceuticals is now what you do with ICAN. Tell me about some of the maybe diseases or different treatments you're using with weed, because, obviously in America, the first thing you think is, just smoking weed, but now it's being used in a lot more applications for medical research and applications. So what kind of, uses does it have right now, and what you're using it for?
Yeah. Again, we started, just a little bit of context here. We started as a pharmaceutical company even before the cannabis component. So we already have experience in creating and manufacturing medications, obviously with the research and all the clinical trials and all the regulation process that it needs. But when we moved into cannabis, which is now our main focus, we started first into what the science is telling us. So yeah, we have the clinical experience, or the more anecdotal experience if I feel pain or I feel stress, you just smoke a joint or things like that. Here in Mexico, one of the things is smoking is not considered a medical procedure. So if you're in cannabis industry, it's not about smoking at all. So we're talking about tinctures and oils and topicals and capsules and other forms, but it's not about smoking. So that means that we need to create, and we're focusing on creating products that are targeting specific diseases. The main reason for people to come to cannabis, and it's well known, is obviously psychiatric things such as stress, anxiety, even lack of sleep. It's one of the most things that people come to our medications for. Obviously, we move to something more, a little bit more tangible, like pain management. One of the main components of the cannabis plant, the THC, it's a very well studied molecule that really helps with pain, especially with higher levels of pain, like oncological patients with cancer. So we have a lot of those, sadly, but it's a great option against opioids and other other medications out there that have a lot of more interaction, a lot of more more processes behind that. So again, we're pushing cannabis as a natural but pharmaceutical option. So it's not about just taking the plant and just giving it to the patient. It goes through a whole process, and we create a finished product. So yeah, mainly stress, anxiety, lack of sleep, pain, but we also have we just launched, for example, a year ago, a sports focus medications, for athletes that have some injuries, or not just about pain, but some sort of injuries or some sort of inflammation. For example, cannabis is great for inflammation. So we're moving slowly, but we're always looking into having some scientific, proof that whatever we're trying to bring to market, it is backed by science, and not just because we're trying to sell something, right?
Yeah. Nice. You said mainly either pills or ointments, things like that is the delivery method?
Correct. So yeah, we have topicals for sure, but most of our medications are orally taken. So tinctures, pills, what have you.
Perfect. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit more about the history of it. I think when most people think of weed in Mexico, you might think of the 3 seasons of Narcos in Mexico, where they're trying to bring down the marijuana trade down there. But it sounds like things are at least moving in the direction of legalization. Would you mind talking to that of like kind of the last 20 years and where things are at now and where you think you see them going in the future with the legalization?
Yeah. So, I mean, starting from the obvious, Mexico has a huge background on cannabis and marijuana for sure. It's a cultural background, but also there is a lot of, we have the perfect weather for all year round cannabis cultivation. Unlike some states in states or like Canada, that's already federally legalized, you can get at least one crop a year outside. The rest has to be indoors, and it's more expensive for sure. So Mexico has this cultural background on cannabis. We also have our historic background of illegal cultivation, obviously. Illegal after prohibition. So the long story short is that Mexico was actually legal back in the day, about 60 years ago. Before the prohibitions started, Mexico was legal. Actually, even in the States was legal. Then came the prohibition era and the whole background of the war on drugs kind of thing. So it's a bigger issue, obviously, not talking about the war on drugs. So long story short, we starting from prohibition. It was a worldwide movement of legalization. First, it was actually a country in Latin America. Uruguay was the first country in the world to fully legalize on a federal level cannabis. Then Canada was the second country to move on a federal legalization. But obviously, the states started. California in the '96 was one of the first. It was the first state to legalize medical marijuana. And then, as you guys know, in the states, state by state, each state has proposing their own laws. So it's not something that Mexico one day said, hey, let's go and crazy and legalize cannabis or legalize marijuana. We saw it was a trend. So we realized that we could not leave that trend behind. So we jumped into the bandwagon, so to speak. And in 2017, Mexico legalized cannabis for medical use and in industrial use, whatever that may mean. When I say whatever that may mean is because they didn't clarify what they were meaning to. So basically, they legalized medical marijuana since 2017, and that's when we founded ICAN. Coincidentally, ICAN was founded in 2016. During the conversations for legalization, we were invited to participate in those conversations with the government, here we are right now. Mexico, it's on a federal illegal framework for medical cannabis. There's a lot of discussions for recreational cannabis. I don't think it's going to happen before the states do a federal legalization of sorts. It's going to be hard for us to do that before you guys, but we're getting there. And like I said, the medical cannabis program right now is basically the whole continent has some sort of medical cannabis program, from the Patagonia in Argentina and Chile all the way to Canada and Alaska. For sure, there's a lot of frameworks to do that. So Mexico is not behind that. Mainly probably the biggest context here for people that are watching this is that Mexico is a federally, we don't see the state by state thing like you guys do. When we do things, it's usually on a federal level. There is no state by state regulations. So this is on a federally level. So throughout the country is how we operate.
Gotcha. That's good to know. I've always kind of confused because I know you have different states like Oaxaca and Chihuahua, but I didn't know, how much it was more federal oversight or state by state. So, obviously we tend to lean more towards, or historically have tended to lean more towards like states' rights over federal. But now, okay, gotcha. That Mexico is the opposite, more federal oversight, which I guess it also makes sense. I think it's 1/3 of the population lives in Mexico City, in like one place.
It's one of the biggest cities in the world. We have over 20 million people in this city, so it is a big city. We have 130 million people in the country, and 20 million live in Mexico City and in the suburbs around the Mexico City.
Yeah, I got to visit it earlier this year. Beautiful place, but man, is it huge. I think it's the largest city on this side of the planet, on like North and South America. I think the only two cities bigger are Tokyo and I want to say Delhi in India. I want to say those are the only two cities.
Yeah, something around that. But I know Tokyo is a little bit up before Mexico City. But yeah, we're the top three at least.
Yeah, 20 million regardless. Perfect. Kind of last point I really wanted to touch on was major changes. So I just had a video come out last week about Trump just got into office. We got a new president coming in 2 months, or I guess he's coming back, and we'll see what that changes. But more importantly, the whole world has changed since he was last in office. Different political leaders, different presidents, different prime ministers, and Mexico is kind of one of the hot button topics right now. And that you not just elected a new president, but your first female president. So President Sheinbaum, want to kind of hear, as a resident in Mexico, what's kind of the word on the street? What are your thoughts? What are you hearing? Are you hopeful, or what's the thought?
I mean, we have to be hopeful. Again, us as humanity, it's especially because what's happening, worldwide, and regardless, I'm not getting too political, but things are a little bit crazy out there. So we need to be hopeful, and we need to be betting for our country, or our countries in general, to move forward and to do the best for their people. So yeah, it's funny because this year was a very political year, meaning you guys had elections, we had elections a month prior. It wasn't really that far off. There was a lot of unknowns. So one of the best things right now for us, at least, is we know what's going to happen in terms of, we know who our president is, we know who the next president of the States is going to be. So at least we get some clarity there. So that is one of the things that is happening right now, is we were waiting to see what's going to happen, not only in Mexico, but also in the States, because we are so intertwined that our fate also depends on what you guys vote on or decide on. President Sheinbaum, she's coming from, is the first female president, is the first Jewish background president as well, but she's a continuance on the previous government, mainly because it was her own party that continued. There is no re-election, obviously, in Mexico, so the previous president left off, and then she won with a majority of votes. And right now, not unlike the States, they have full control of the House and the Senate as well. So it's almost a one-party system at this point, which is never good in general. No politics, but it's never good to have just one-sided political system. We'll see how the States fare for the next 4 years. True things to be said is she's a scientist. She actually had her doctoral thesis, I think, was on climate change. So that's always good. She's always, at least on paper, she's looking to be more of a scientific approach. She's going to listen to, we hope, to science and to the medical advices and to the professionals, we believe. Like you said, yes, she's the first female president in Mexico, which is quite a big thing. I mean, Mexico is still a little bit more conservative country, a little bit in the religious and cultural sense. So we see a nice move forward with that. In terms of our industry in cannabis, we believe that she is not going to be an impediment. She believes in the cannabis regulation instead of prohibition, which is also a good thing. But it's still a little bit early just to do our predictions. I strongly believe that the next years are going to be good years in general. There's a lot of work to be done for sure. It's not going to be easy. We need to work and sweat our asses off. Sorry if I cannot say that here in this video. But I do believe, I'm very optimistic of what's going to happen in the next, it's 6 years for us, unlike 4 years for you.
Gotcha. No, you're very right about that. The 2 points I wanted to touch on, what you said is, one, you got to be hopeful. Whether it's Trump or Kamala or anybody else, like nobody wants it to be bad. Nobody wants their president to do a terrible job. It's like I mentioned in my last video, like I live here. I want my country to do well. I don't care, if it's Kamala or Trump. I want the country to succeed because I'm a resident here. The other thing, you're so right about our countries are like our destinies are like tied together. And I think during Biden's administration, Mexico officially surpassed China as our number one trading partner. So it was that way, a long time ago, before, China kind of blew up in the 50s, 60s. But now it's back. Everything's come full circle. So we'll see, man. There's going to be a lot of Ford and a lot of these large car manufacturers and different builders are moving a lot of their manufacturing to Mexico right now, and specifically, I believe the northern regions, just because it makes it easier to ship it here via train. But yeah, we're tied together and getting more tied together by the day. So I'm excited to see what you guys produce, and excited to grab a drink with you next time I'm down in Mexico City.
Grant, you're always welcome. We'll host you whenever you come to Mexico. We'll show you a good time, and hopefully we'll have this conversation in down the road and see where we are. It could be a nice transition of where we were and now where we are 1 year, 2 years time. And like I said, there is no crystal ball here, but we have to be hopeful, we have to be optimistic, and we have to work together. So that's basically my message here.
100%. That's one of the reasons I started this show. Like, I want to see where you're at now and where you're at, 2 years from now, and hopefully made some great progress, and hopefully things are moving closer to legalization, and everything's moving in the right area. And that's what I want to kind of show this ever-growing international community of startup founders. And I got a lot of inspiration out of Anthony Bourdain and his travels around the world. But unfortunately, you can only travel to Tokyo and show off ramen and sushi so many times before the audience says, "All right, I've seen it." But there's always new startups, always new startup cities, always new inventions, always new different laws changing, different presidents changing. So it's cool, and we can see your progress as you go, and people want to see you and other entrepreneurs we've interviewed succeed in what you're doing, because it's a net good for the world. So. But yeah, we'll catch up again, and I'll see you down there sometime. Hopefully I can make some time for next year to stop down there, and we'll see. But man, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
My pleasure too, Brent. Thanks so very much for having me here.
Awesome. I'll see you around.